Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery and I was going to check in on my cocoon nursery bins, but if you were with me during our last check-in on those systems, which was 10 days ago, you'll remember that I normally keep them all right down there on the ground below the window. And at this point, they're all gone. What's down there is just a freshly built bin waiting for worms to be put into it. But all the nursery bins are missing. Where might they be? I think I've hinted at it, maybe, here and there. I think I might have told people, maybe in comments or something, but not in a video formally. But I've got something going on with those. It's a little bit of an experiment. I thought it would be high time that I clued everyone in on what was going on here. The bins that I'm talking about are not only the first three listed here, which were the nursery bins that we checked in on 10 days ago, but now there's a fourth one here, which only became a nursery bin 5 days ago. And I tweaked out my list here a little bit just to make it a little bit more descriptive, to show what kind of worm type each one is. There's the age, and I even listed which current production system I've got to which each of these bins is associated, because these are, what we're going to be checking in on today are the cocoons left by the worms that occupy one or the other of these systems here. I've got, a number of buckets with the NCs. I've got my my Vermibag tote with my mixed worm population in it. I've got pocket feeding experiments going on. I got lasagna feeding experiments going on. So, when I check in on these cocoon nurseries, those are the cocoons that were left behind by the worms that are in those current active systems. But let me show you what I mean when I talk about what's right here, the on-rack note. So, like I said, we checked in on these 10 days ago, but a couple days later, 7 days ago, I constructed this unusual little rig over here. It's just, well, shows you how well it's built. It's just 1x4 material, and it's all just standing up on its edge. Nothing's holding it together, and I even used some bricks here just to try to prevent some sort of a domino toppling effect from occurring. So I've got little things here and there just trying to close off any place where the air can escape, because what's underneath the box sort of thing that I built down below are lights, and here we can actually see them through this piece of clear plastic. I can even kind of stick my finger in there and feel the heat, but I'm trying to close off any place where the heat can ventilate out and escape. I want to keep that heat in there. The whole thing is powered through the extension cord off the ceiling running down into the system, and it's just one string of lights. It doesn't draw a lot of power. I know that it kind of goes a little bit against what I usually try to achieve in my worm systems, which is to not spend any electrical bills or not spend any money on materials. I really do attempt to, do the whole thing on the cheap, but I figured, running a string of lights, which according to the box only draws 40 watts, it's like having a 40-watt light bulb burning, which, is keeping X number of cocoon nurseries hopefully warm enough to actually trigger the hatching of the cocoons. So we've been suspecting that maybe the temperatures were too cool, and maybe this will help. I don't know. After 7 days, it would be kind of nice to see some sort of a improvement, but I'm not counting on it. But I do want to check in on moisture levels. I want to check in on, just how things look in general. And I also like the idea of maybe putting in a little morsel of food into each of these, just so that if there are worms beginning to show up on the scene, little baby worms, there might be one tempting chunk of something in the middle that they might be drawn to reveal themselves, so I can see that we've actually got something happening in there. So I'm going to put on a glove, and we're going to get to work. As you can see, all their favorites are represented here in this little assortment of cantaloupe, pumpkin, and banana peel. We've got some soiled napkins down here that we're going to include as the lure area in each of these bins to see if, maybe if there are babies starting to develop in each system, that we might be able to get a peek at them if they all come together for some delicious scraps of food put out there for them. And here in this oldest one, 70, what did it say, 76 I think? Whew, man, there are any worms in here. 76 days later, you would kind of think there has to be. But there's one variable here that puts a kink in things, is the fact that this is the cocoons from African night crawlers. African night crawlers, being a tropical worm, may require warmer temperatures in order to hatch. So since there's only been warmth applied to this system for a week, I still wonder if it's sufficient time, or if I started into the application of warmth too late in the game. So I just wanted to kind of stick my hand down there to see what the material down low feels like. Luckily, this stuff is still pretty damp. Last time we were in on all these systems 10 days ago, we applied moisture. Luckily, it's holding up pretty good, but my intent is to apply a little bit more. I believe one viewer even made a comment that sort of stuck with me that says, you know, just start watering them like a plant, you know, and then you can't overwater. Just make sure that they've got ample dampness so that the hatching can occur. Obviously suggesting, or almost saying outright, that if you don't expect to see hatching. You know, pretty much pointing out how critical the dampness variable is. In the past, I had always kind of squirted down the material during this first pass through it, just because I already knew ahead of time it was my intention to dampen the material, but I wanted to just give it an inspection before I did any dampening. See what we've got in here. People have pointed out that ANCs, even if there are babies in here, I could easily miss them because they're just so minuscule and tiny in size. So, you know, I wasn't expecting to see a big worm party here. But I am going to kind of stick to the plan of trying to keep this warm for a little bit longer before I write this off as maybe a loss, you know. I guess there's always that possibility that maybe those cocoons were just sitting around for too long without the conditions turning optimal, and they kind of missed their opportunity to develop to full term. So maybe this is just never going to happen here. I'm not even sure how much longer I really want to stick to the game if that's the case. So even though it doesn't really seem like it needs it urgently or that it needs a lot, I'm still going to give it a little sprinkling, as I'm going to do in each of these bins, even if I sense that it might be just fine. I don't want to trust myself on that. I don't consider myself a good judge of that. I think I'm safer opting for what that person said in my comments, that, you know, maybe even going a little bit overboard, or what you might sense to be seeming to be overboard, might be really what's needed the most. So sorry about all that banging. I guess it's just the way the hose is coming up off the bottle and hitting into the container over there. Let's see if I can maintain silence while I'm spraying. Ooh. I didn't really pump up this thing too hard, so it's not spraying that strong either. I feel like I could just be a little bit more precise. It does spray pretty hard and quite a bit when I pump it up really hard, but it's not really a perfect mechanism. It's a little bit old, and from time to time after I pump it up, if I do put a lot of pressure in it, I start to see the water try to escape out through the neck, through the top, coming up through the pump. I think it's the lower valve or something that's just allowing the pressurized contents to escape through there. I did actually clean it off and succeed in stopping that leaking from happening for a little while, but then it started happening again. I think I need some silicone to put in there to help with that a little bit. That's what the YouTube Fix-It video I saw about it said. Alright, as you can see, we didn't go too crazy moistening things here. I think what we did here was probably enough. Yeah, it feels pretty good. Like I said, it already had a pretty decent moisture level when we first started in here. So I'm going to leave it at that. Kind of one pass through with a good squirt every few inches. And this is going to go right back up onto that warming rack that I built. But the real question anymore here is for how much longer, you know? Do I want to continue on this if this is really not going to happen in this particular system? And when do I make that decision? When do I determine that that's really what's happening or not happening here? So let's grab one of these napkins. I don't want it to be too big. And I also don't want to shield the deliciousness. I just thought it might be a nice idea to have it on top of something in a way. But having it right there seems like it would, you know, provide the best chance of becoming discovered, as opposed to it sitting on top of a piece of paper and being, you know, too far out of reach to be sensed. So we got enough here for a couple more bins. I also allocated 2 nice sized chunks of pumpkin for each luring area, luring station, or whatever we want to call it. But I think that, you know, that's got to cause a ruckus if there's baby worms in here. They're going to come running for that, I believe. And in the end, I guess, you know, what we could do is just place this right over the top to help build the suspense when we come back in here to check on this. This should be an interesting reveal. I hope that there's some baby worms that start coming into the system soon. Like I said, this will be going right back up onto the warming rack with the rest of them. But I'm still torn on for how long. So if anyone's got any thoughts on that, I'd be interested in hearing what you think. Let's go get the next bin. We'll give it the same treatment. I guess we'll work our way down. That was the oldest that we just checked in on, those ANCs, those African night crawlers. This is the next oldest such system, nursery system, which is 50 days old. This is the one with the mixed population of worms in it. By mixed population of worms, I refer to the combination of blue worms, mainly blue worms, I believe, red wigglers, and European night crawlers. So that's my best guess as to what mainly occupies this system. That sheet of plastic seems to have been doing a really good job recirculating the moisture in here, because these pieces of paper are very damp. It's interesting. What's that? Every now and then I see a little something that, if it looks like a worm, I kind of react. Is that a worm? That actually might be a worm. And I don't get overly excited when I see a worm in one of these systems, because I can't really say for sure that when I started I had, you know, 100% depopulated the system of worms. So the worms I'm finding could very well be ones that were, you know, left behind when I separated the main amount of the populations from their castings. And, you know, if this happened 50 days ago, a worm this small was probably still quite small. You know, or maybe, who knows, maybe it was a hatchling that emerged here within this system. It would be nice to think that. So I've got my spray bottle. Maybe instead of inspecting and then spraying, we'll just incorporate those actions together. Stuff's pretty dry over here. Definitely deserving of a little spray. I rinsed off my glove after we finished with the last bin because it was just so mucky with the wet castings stuck to it. Just kind of counterintuitive for me to want to get castings that damp, because I usually want them kind of loose and flaky and at a consistency that could easily be sifted if I wanted to do that. Here again, you know, I'm not really expecting to have a whole bunch of worms kind of just bounce out of the material and say, hey, here I am, see me? And I mean, for that matter, even if there are worms, they could be so small, or they could be right there in front of me and just not moving. There's, you know, many reasons why we could be just breezing right past a whole bunch of them when they're right there. You know, in the past I've allowed the camera just to run for a few minutes after kind of opening up a section like this, just to see if my disturbance of the material could trigger the movement of some inhabitants of the material. I didn't really plan on doing that today. I just wanted to get the moisture in here. I guess it doesn't hurt to take a quick peek, and I think maybe the main thing I wanted to do was get those little bait stations going, because in the end I believe that's going to be the simplest way to reveal what's going on in these bins. You know, if you got a pile of pumpkin and banana peels and cantaloupe rinds in a bin like this, it's definitely going to attract the attention of the worms. So I think that next check-in should be a little bit more interesting, hopefully, and maybe a little bit more fruitful in terms of, you know, showing us the result of keeping one of these systems around. I've had luck in the past, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee luck on all occasions, so I'm still prepared to fail miserably at this. I don't consider myself as a really savvy cocoon handler. I'm actually kind of a novice, but I'm always game for experimentation and trying stuff, so I'm all for trying to preserve the baby worms that could be coming out of cocoons and keeping them in my wormery. Here again, it's a pretty puny little worm. I would have to say, in a bin that's 50 days old, a worm this size probably was born here. So perhaps these are all good signs. The fact that we did bump into a couple small worms. Now here, interestingly enough, I wonder if there's just a greater amount of moisture over here or what, but I just encountered a number of worms here, one of which is a little bit larger than the rest, but most look similar in size to the one we saw earlier. Here's another pretty puny one, another pretty puny one, maybe even punier, another pretty puny one. They're all pretty much the same size and all pretty puny. There does seem to be a good number of them here. I can feel the warmth, so maybe it's also the warmth down there, but I would have to guess that it's the moisture, because the material is nice and moist. But it is kind of cool to actually see baby worms. I wonder if, you know, these are the red wigglers or these blue worms. Either way, I'm glad to see some results in here, and the fact that we're seeing results here in this 50-day-old bin and no such results in the 76-day-old bin, it's really starting to make me wonder if the 76-day-old bin is just a lost cause. This one, I feel like it's going to be, you know, a worthwhile effort to foster it and try to help these babies emerge so that we can round them up. So, I don't know, I think the moisture was pretty good on this go around too. I think I applied, you know, a decent amount. Once again, there I go trying to gauge it myself, even though I'm not very good at doing that. But we're going to do the same here. We're going to drop in a similar assortment of delicious little bits. There's some cantaloupe. These two pieces are already stuck together, so they'll go together. And banana. How can you miss with a combo like that? Same deal here. We'll cover up a little bit so that when we get back in here to check on it, we're going to have a little bit of anticipation and excitement when we reveal what's going on under here. Let's get this little guy up here too. Did I leave any other little worms stranded over here in the dry? I hope not. Try to get them back into the pile. I'm not sure if they would find their way back. Just in case they can't, I want to make sure I don't strand any of them. So that was kind of cool. Here too, this moisture on this paper is another good sign to say that the system probably does have a decent amount of moisture in it. The fact that we added a little bit more is not going to hurt. It probably just help. And I guess this is also another good sign showing that the plastic covering is doing a good job keeping stuff protected from excess evaporation. So I'm noticing out here on the plastic covering, we left behind one of our little friends. So we should get him back into the material too before we cover up. I must admit I didn't take great care in making sure that the plastic was not covered in worms. I could have definitely taken greater care in checking. I'm not sure. Before, it seemed like the other way it was oriented, these two edges were kind of dry and getting a little bit excess ventilation, and maybe if we do it this way, the bottom portion will get a little bit dry. But maybe the damp paper there will help, so I don't know. It might just be a wash. Might not be much different. Depends on. I guess we'll try it this way and hope that it does a good job keeping the dampness in. So on to the next one, and I think that one is, what was that? If we did 76, this was 50. I think the next one's only 30 days old. Yeah, this one's 30 days. I checked when I was over there. So 30 days now that this one's been running this way since the worms were moved out and we started treating this as just a bunch of cocoons to be cared for. Well, when I look at a system like this, sitting around for 30 days, waiting for cocoons to hatch, the baby worms are much, much smaller than these guys. So these are not the babies that we're waiting for. These little guys probably just sort of evaded my process when I collected the worms and moved them out. So these guys sort of were left behind to care for the babies as they start emerging from their cocoons. And I don't know if it's worth the trouble trying to clean off this piece of plastic. I'm just going to fold it in half, so if there's any left in there that I missed, they're going to be able to stay nice and damp. Here too, we got a couple. What do we got? This is ENCs. So yeah, these last two are European night crawlers. Here too, I don't know if we got a worm there. Yeah. I don't know why. I just want to get these little guys off. I always feel like they're going to start crawling when I'm not watching and end up on the floor. And I would not want that to happen. So we got a little bit of a worm party, but not the worms that we were hoping for. The worms we were hoping for are probably still maybe in their cocoons, maybe hatching at this point. I think we'll just do the same as we've been doing, kind of inspect the material. This material is definitely very, very fine, very crumbly, almost in a way, you know, suggesting that it's possibly too dry, but I don't think so. It's just very nice castings. Definitely doesn't feel like it's too dry, but still, I'm not going to trust my own judgment on that. I'm going to stick to the game plan here. I think our sprayer needs just a little bit more pressure. There we go. This will help us get this job done a lot more quickly. I don't miss my little pump sprayer, the one that I would have to squirt, you know, squeeze the little trigger handle and pump the whole bottle of water out of there. And this thing delivers that same amount of water in about 30 seconds without me having to squirt it about 300 times. Good number of worms in here, but not the worms we're waiting for, like I said earlier. These are worms that probably just slipped through the cracks when I was doing the migration and removal of the population out of here. And I did so knowing that I'd be back in here trying to launch an effort to collect up the babies once they come around, and at that point these adult worms can also get rounded up. Not to say that all the worms we saw were adults. A lot of them did look pretty small, so who's to say, you know? Maybe they were born almost immediately after the nursery started and have had a whole month to grow. I don't know. I'm not good at gauging the age of a worm just from looking at it based on its size or anything like that, so I'm not really sure, but I thought it doesn't take long for a worm to reach maturity. So this has been looking pretty good, you know. I mean, the material looks nice. It's nice and damp. The adult worms, I guess, provide us with a few worm spottings, but maybe, you know, not exactly what we were hoping for. But perhaps in one of our next check-ins, we'll start seeing a little bit more of the action we're hoping for. It looks like down here, once again, maybe this was, again, where the, maybe this was the closest to where the warmth was from the lights below. It seems like we're starting to bump into some worms. None of them looking tiny or anything like that. Some of them looking a little bit small. Possibly born here. Probably born here. I don't know. It's hard to say. Well, born here. Just, we know they were all born here. It was just when. Was it during the last 30 days after the main population was removed, or what? But it's definitely hard to say. So we're going to set this one up just the same way with all those tempting morsels, and now we know there's definitely going to be a party because we already saw all the players. But that's okay. I don't mind giving them a little treat. I just know that when we check in here and see a good amount of that bait nibbled away, we're going to know who did it, and it's not going to have been the babies. It will have been all the stragglers that we observed. So let's see, this is our third bin now doing this, so I've got to leave enough for one more, right? So a little bit of cantaloupe, a little bit of banana, 2 more chunks of pumpkin, and then we'll cover up with a chunk of paper. So I want to leave one for the other bin that we're doing. And that other bin that we're doing has only been in this mode for 5 days. 5 days ago I did a removal of the worms that I had lured out of the finished castings. When I did an inspection of the castings, I bumped into only a couple worms along the way, and I threw them in with the rest. So I don't know what we're going to find when we go through there, but we'll probably apply some moisture. I think we will definitely apply some moisture. I just want to avoid leaving it to chance. That is the game plan. So they're all getting moistened and dampened and checked on. And they're all going to get a little treat. Even though the one nursery's only been here for 5 days, I'm not going to wait. I'm going to just start laying out the lure to see if any babies start showing up. They've got some place to go and hang out, so we could try to round them up. Alright, so I guess maybe here we'll leave the gap, and hopefully it'll not dry out too much. Luckily it's mainly castings, and the castings do have a really incredible ability to hang on to their moisture. So we'll come back, the surface will be a bit dry, but the castings right below will be nice and damp. So one more to go. Let's get it over here. Alright, let's see, what do we got going on in here? It is a little bit repetitive. It's just the same treatment to the same sort of setup numerous times over, and on each occasion you have to sort of set your expectations low because you're not really expecting to see many worms, if any. Just keep kind of praying. Alright, so you can see I kind of went a little bit elaborate over here, trying to utilize some of this cardboard and paper to also serve as a moisture barrier, or maybe not so much as a moisture barrier, but it seems to be serving quite nicely as like a landing pad for the moisture that recirculates on the plastic above it. So I guess we got to get this stuff out of our way if we don't want it to be in our way. Again, I just worry about, some of these little guys hanging out on this stuff, not liking the bright lights. Hopefully that little guy could just slip into that little tube and retreat away from the bright lights. This guy too, I'll just turn this one upside down and place it over there in a protected way. Alright. It's like here too, you can even see this is the type of barrier that I use. It's not even so much a barrier because you can see it's full of holes, but up until 5 days ago, this side of the bin was set up in such a way that it was luring all the worms out of the material, and it did a really good job. Obviously not 100% because there's still stragglers, but it in general does a nice job rounding up the majority of the worms. And I'm sure, like, something like this after the fact would do a really great job getting the last of them to come together as well. So either way, we're going to give this one the same treatment. We're going to give it a little dampness, going to give it a little bit of bait, and get it back on the warmth and keep hoping for the best. Okay. The castings in this tub look really nice too. These European night crawlers produce such nice castings. You could see I've been kind of dropping my standards in a way. A lot of times you wouldn't see me at this stage if the casting still had all, a lot of unbroken down sticks and stems and stuff like this littering it. But I've been kind of, I've been altering the definition of what finished castings mean, especially since my finished castings don't go straight to, gardening anymore. I usually keep them around for this particular purpose right here, which is to see if I can coax whatever remaining life might still be lingering within it out. And I don't know, some people might say that the number of cocoons and the babies that emerge from them is trivial. Why bother? I couldn't tell you that for sure. I don't know if there's like some easy way to estimate what it is that I'm actually achieving here. You know, how many worms am I maintaining in my wormery versus releasing them out into the garden or whatever. I never really feel like I'm getting a huge haul when I do one of these, but just the fact that I do get some babies collected and returned to the rest of their family, and also kind of getting that feeling that I'm not just putting them out into the garden and sort of losing them from the head count of my wormery. It's just kind of a satisfying sense. But I still couldn't even tell you like if the reward is, you know, worth the effort. It's hard to say. I kind of do this as a hobby anyway, so I kind of treat it almost like an experiment to see what might become of it. And I got no problem putting new sort of, you know, steps and objectives into my processes. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to win me over and convince me it's the way to go forever, but nowadays I've been doing this in most of my systems, if not all of them. And in the warmer months, I felt like I had pretty good success. The fact that it's cooler now, I'm kind of resetting my expectations, just in case I don't get the type of, you know, results I was expecting or hoping for. 2 baby worms, not too many stragglers left behind in this one, it seems. But we're still not at that edge worm. Maybe we'll see some more. That might have been the warmed edge where the babies are hanging out. No, I don't think so, not after 5 days. The only ones we're going to find in here are the ones that evaded my collection process when I did the haul outs, and they're going to have to just be here to deal with the babies when the babies start showing up. Okay, feels like I'm losing pressure here in the bottle, but I'm not going to pump it up anymore. I think we're going to go with what we got here. So down here, we're seeing what we sort of expected. Just worms hanging out down at the bottom. That's probably right above where the lamp was and where the warmth was. Definitely saw a couple pretty small wormies down in there too. Let's see here too. Sort of spread them around and see what we can see. A little bit surprising because some of this material down here is a little bit dry. Maybe it's maybe it is the warmth that they're drawn to, not the moisture. Almost makes me feel like I should just give this material a little bit of an extra spray, because it does feel perhaps a little bit drier than the other bins felt. But then again, this system hasn't really had all the care that most of my nursery bins get on a regular basis with the spray downs. This is actually my first tending to this 5-day-old nursery system. So after a few more check-ins and a couple more applications of dampness as needed, it'll probably feel a lot better and become a lot more hospitable for cocoon hatching. I guess the real question is, do I wait 10 days again like I did last time between the check-ins? I don't know. I feel like it's almost like that kid in the back seat. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? I don't want to be that kid, you know? I want to just let the process go and then check in at some point in the future, but not always be sort of taking a peek to see what happens, because guess what? You're not going to see any difference. So that's really what I'm trying to do. Trying to exhibit self-control and resist the urge to check in on them constantly, because that seems like the only way to really, get some sort of a interesting observation, is to allow some time so you can actually see a difference. I'm starting to feel a little bit better now. That first pass through with the spray down seems like it helped, but I'm adding more anyway. So I'm guessing that after this sort of back and forth spray down, it should be in pretty good shape. We'll restore all those coverings. I don't know about all that cardboard though. It almost seems like that cardboard could easily come out and be used in the adult bin, or the adult bins. The worms, the associated systems that these worms went into were 3 buckets, a little bit different from what I usually do. And there's room in those buckets to use those chunks of cardboard, and they probably go to better use over there. But, I don't know, maybe I'll just return them to this system. Maybe I'll have some sort of an interesting idea of what to do with them. But you saw I had those 2 barricades that were kind of holding things up against the feeding area when the feeding area was still here. I have all those cardboard tubes and coffee filters. There's a good amount of carbon over there. Yeah, the worms definitely seem to enjoy hanging out on it. Maybe I should just put it back more or less the way we found it when we got in here. And they could just hang out on it the way they were when we first arrived. Okay, very cool. We're almost done. We just got to drop in the yummy foods. And I think in here too we saw enough worms to expect that we will see worms when we come back in here next. But they won't be the babies, they'll be just the stragglers that didn't make it into the collection process when I was in here to round up the worms and move them out into the buckets. But that's okay. They'll be the pediatricians and the baby nurses to tend to the needs of the babies when they start to show up. Alright, I didn't really want to throw all kinds of shrapnel into here. I just wanted to have something that covers things a bit. So I'll leave these behind and we'll just use this for the reveal later. And as for the rest of this stuff, well, if nothing else, maybe it is just helping with the prevention of excess evaporation out of the bins. So maybe there's no harm in putting them back more or less the way we found them, just kind of draped over the top surface, covering things loosely. And I'm sure we'll find worms hanging out on it again when we come back, or maybe no, maybe we won't find any because they'll all be down here where the food is. I guess time will tell, we'll have to see. And that might just depend on how quickly we get back in here. Maybe we get back in here and that food's already gone. So I guess we'll see. Oh, look at this guy. Holy cow. He's got himself all draped through those bubbles. European nightcrawler, good sized worm. Looks like we got another one right there. Sneaky little guys. I can see more of them. They're all over the place. Yeah, that's why I worry when I take these plastic sheets off. I wouldn't want those guys to panic and start running around and getting off the things that are all going to end up back in the bin. If they end up on the table or on the floor, they're goners. Wouldn't want that. Alright everyone, that's my check-in today with my nursery bins. You've seen my little rig for trying to keep the systems warm. You've seen my little attempt at rounding them up with the bait. We'll see how it goes. Keeping my fingers crossed. So if you run one of these, I'd be curious to see how yours is run, or if there's differences or any sort of special techniques you're using. Leave remarks in the comment about your cocoon nurseries if you're running one, or even if you're thinking about running one. Throw some questions out there, you know. I'll see what I could do to help answer them, or somebody else that's watching will jump in to help. So I'm going to get this stuff put away and get myself cleaned up and reassemble the rack with all the stuff in order over there and try to keep everything warm. But I'm not going to keep it around for all that because that's boring. Before I go though really quickly, let me just say thank you. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please remember to give me a quick like. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. Alright everyone, thanks for watching. Have a great day.